All right, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to our live stream. We don't do a lot of live streams, but incredibly grateful to have a conversation today with one of our mastermind students, Katie Lear. Katie has been busy in the world of Dungeons and Dragons and creating courses and doing some pretty exceptional things. And more than anything, we wanted to have just a open and honest conversation about the world of online course building. I feel like for many of us as clinicians, building courses and thinking about courses is becoming more a norm, but it's still very hard to find other therapists that are doing this. And so, Katie, incredibly grateful. We get to have a conversation. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It is so exciting to be here after listening to Selling the Couch content for so long. It's exciting to be on the other side of the microphone.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can even start there because right now you are in private practice, but before I know we had talked and for a number of years you had been listening to the STC podcast. This was coming out of community mental health,
Yeah.
doing all of those things as well. Tell us a little bit about that journey. And then before you do that, if you guys are tuned in, you can feel free to leave a comment or questions for Katie or for me as well in the comments on YouTube, and then we'll be able to see the comments as they pop up.
Yeah. When I first found Selling the Couch, I was just fresh out of grad school. I'd gone to grad school in my late 20s, transitioning out of a theater career. So I'd had a theater undergrad degree, had switched to psychology. I joke sometimes, like, I think I'm the only person in the history of the world who like went into counseling as like a money move, where I was like, 49 a year would be incredible compared
Mm,
to what I've been making as like a nanny. So
mm,
for me, it was about doing something fulfilling that also had more stability in it. And then I found
mm,
myself in the world of community mental health, which, yes, was giving me that number that at the time felt like an upgrade, but
mm,
at this insane cost of so much stress, such a high caseload, so much vicarious trauma. I was working
mm,
in the South Bronx in New York City, which is a really, really tough place to live. And so
mm,
I was hearing a lot of really, really tough stories and had just, intense case after intense case after intense case. And, often would see 10 people back to back without a bathroom break, right? Just all day long. And
mm,
so I was losing it. I was, crying on Sunday nights about having to go back to work on Monday, despite
mm,
having like a wonderful manager and like great supervision. And so one of the ways that I coped was I would take my little, 30-minute lunch break and I would go out of the building and walk around in the sun to get out of my windowless office. And I was like, I wonder if there are any podcasts about private practice. Like,
mm,
I need to keep this hope alive for myself because it is feeling further and further away. In New York, you have to be fully licensed before starting practice. So I had like a
mm.
2-year runway before I could do anything really. And found Selling the Couch immediately and listened on my lunch break most days throughout my licensure period,
Mm.
just to remind myself that there was something that could come after this and that I wasn't stuck in this. And it really helped me manage burnout in that stage of my life.
Yeah, I don't know. Even as you shared this, like I think about the journey for so many of us as clinicians, like the ideas of like what we thought what it was going to be like, often the reality of like how we start out. Uh,
Yeah.
and even just like you talking about the 10 back-to-back cases, like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine doing that
Yeah.
and not like, I just think about like after that 10th client, like, I don't know. I don't think I'd want to interact with anyone.
It
So,
was it was the struggle to remember, like, names, right? To
mm,
remember, like, client names I was fine with, but any extended family or friends was,
yeah.
like, half the job was just keeping people's names straight at that point because you had a caseload of 40 plus families.
Yeah.
Um, but I also remember even then, like, I would skip selling the couch episodes that were about scaling or about like
Mm,
non-traditional therapy stuff, because my aspirations were very just small and direct of like, I don't need any of that stuff. That's never going to be me. Like,
yeah,
I don't need an app. I don't need an online anything or a podcast. Like, I just need my small private practice, and then
yeah,
I'm done and I'm out, you know.
yeah. I mean, so I know we'll probably accelerate the story here a little bit, but you jumped into private practice over time,
Mm-hmm.
and then you said something which is what I wanted to hone in on. You said most clinicians, especially when they enter private practice, they're often thinking just how do I get a full caseload? They're
Yes.
not really thinking, um, maybe they have dreams, but like the putting it together is not always, comes natural. The other thing I was thinking was like, even just our clinical training, it's very much like do therapy or assessment or supervision or teaching, but it's not
Yeah.
like even words like scale. Like I remember the first time I heard scaling and I was like, that's such a marketing term. I don't like it. Like, any of that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I was wondering if you could just share your own experience with that. And
I mean, in my training program, like not only was it strictly preparing us for clinical work, but it was strictly preparing us for community mental health clinical
mm,
work. Like at
yeah,
that point for me, private practice was the crazy dream. Like that was the big crazy thing of like, what if I did something different and went on my
mm,
own? And there was a lot of fear around that I had given to me by people in other businesses. And then also that was sort of circulated through our department of like, most new businesses fail.
mm,
It's really hard to market yourself. You're going to be the only one in charge of your marketing if you go into
mm,
private practice. And also, I think a little bit of shade, subtle shade about, when they would go around and ask people what niche they saw themselves working with or what their specialty was, everybody kind of tacitly understood that private practice was not the thing you were supposed to say on the first day of class. It was like,
mm,
they wanted to see you really in the trenches doing the most difficult work, which is honorable and also not always sustainable.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had very kind of similar messages. And I remember somebody, even like a loved one, telling me, like, if I kept going down the psychology route and doing therapy, like, would eventually go crazy. Like, sort of these like messages around, like, like, what's going to happen. I
Yeah.
mean, I think for so many of us, there's so much unlearning, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just, I mean, yeah, it's so much unlearning. So,
Yeah. No, in some ways, I think having the theater background was helpful at that time because I
mm,
was already so used to rejection and failure that I was like, God, it's got to be easier than that. Like, I don't know how hard private practice is going to be, but it's got to be easier than auditioning,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
all the time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you jumped into this world of private practice. Was it a quick transition or
It
like
really
a,
was. We
yeah,
had an opportunity to move out of New York that almost perfectly lined up with me getting my full licensure in New
uh,
York. So I applied to both states at the same time, quit my agency job, moved to North Carolina, and then opened up my private practice immediately. So kind of did an immediate switch from one to the other. And my goal at the time, like as far as my private practice aspirations, was to get to a point where I could replace my agency income with private practice clients
mm,
instead. So I was like, if I could make 50,000 a year,
mm,
that'd be
very
great.
good. Yeah,
That'd be
yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah. I mean, I love like hearing stories like this because this is like these are our stories, right? Like this is the stories of like the majority of us and thinking about this kind of stuff. So you're in private practice and tell us about like the specialization, like where you honed in on and
Yeah. I love kids. I love working with kids. I always have. That's been like the through line of my life. And so I started out doing play therapy and drama therapy and got credentialed in both of those
mm,
after graduation. And through doing play and drama and CBT with kids, kind of the further I went down the road, the more I got really excited about anxiety and
mm,
OCD specifically. So went back and got some ERP training. And I would say 80% of my caseload now is preteen age kids who have anxiety with some OCD features.
mm.
Yeah.
um and how old is the private practice at this point?
Ooh, I think going on 5 years. I think we're coming up on the 5 year mark now.
That's amazing. That's amazing to build all of that in 5 years.
Yeah.
Uh, I wanted to shift a little bit. Ava says so true, by the way, and that's in reference to like the messages I think we all get. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I mean it is true. And for those of you guys that are tuning in live, be sure to leave a comment. I can definitely see it here on the screen, and we want to keep this nice and engaging. And if you have questions for Katie, questions for me, please leave them. We genuinely want to be of service to you and help you and think through this stuff. So you've got this private practice, Katie, and most therapists aren't thinking most therapists think, oh my gosh, I built a successful practice. Like they're
Yeah.
not really thinking beyond. So what made you think like, or if they think beyond, it's often like, am I going to transition to a group, right?
Yeah.
What made you go down the online course path?
I think two things. The biggest one was I desperately, desperately wanted to be a mom. That was like a
Mm,
driving factor for me pivoting in my career and going back to school in the first place. This was like my ultimate end goal.
mm,
And I also have some chronic health issues. I knew I would likely struggle with infertility. And as I've gotten older, have had more days where I'm out of commission from chronic health stuff than I
mm,
used to have. So on the one hand, I had this awareness that like there were going to be times when I wasn't going to be able to show up to work the way that I wanted to, and finally got to a point where we were in the process of adopting our son, and this like amazing thing that I'd waited for so long was about to happen. I was finally going to be a mom, and I looked at my caseload and was like, oh my gosh, like I have the money now to be a parent, which is incredible.
mm,
I'm not going to have any time with this kid, and if I
mm,
do, I'm going to be emotionally wiped because I am seeing 25 to 30 kids a week in therapy doing this intensive kind of play therapy work. Like, I want to spend time with this child that I've waited so long
mm.
to meet, and I want to be physically healthy. So being able to have the kind of family life that I wanted was my number one goal.
Yeah, I think it's that we as clinicians talk a lot about self-care with our clients, but I think many of us like struggle with it, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so you're seeing these 20 to 25 clients. You know, we're both parents, right? And I know that our kiddos are, you know, in the same ballpark ish in terms of age. And this is something for me as well, because especially, you know, for me and those of you guys who are listening, I think you know this, like our little one was 2 months early, so she was premature. We went through a whole NICU experience and it really made, and so part of it was practical. Like I needed to spend more time because she needed early childhood intervention. She had low muscle tone, so like all of these kind of different things. And then the other part was like exactly what you outlined. Like, what if I had a whole successful career, but then it's like, but I didn't have that time, you know?
Yeah.
Because you're right, like they're so young for a season and uh yeah, it's just like, is that worth it? I mean, that was definitely on my heart as well. So I'm so glad you shared it. Why did you go down the course route versus, I don't know, like groups or, you know, any of these things?
I knew pretty early on that group practice was not going to be it for me. Like
Mm,
the idea of being a manager to other people stressed me out to no end. Like I don't
mm,
think I was ever really good at like being managed and having a
mm,
boss. And so the idea of flipping the relationship around and having to like get on somebody else about their documentation was not
mm,
a fun lifestyle for me.
mm,
And it seemed very complicated, like very difficult to handle all of those moving pieces. So I didn't want that. I thought about groups, but it was the same deal of like, I still have to be there. I still
mm,
have to be in person. My son was also born during COVID. So that really
mm,
influenced my mindset a lot. So, I had this sort of lifestyle that I wanted for myself, but there was also a very practical piece of at the time that I was taking my maternity leave, I was getting more referrals and more inquiries than I'd ever gotten in my life from very anxious kids. And I could not take them. I wasn't taking anybody for months. My wait list was closed and I had nowhere to refer them to. So part of
mm,
it was also meeting a need of, can I give these kids something to
mm,
tide them over during this time? Or can I offer something to these kids who may be able to get by learning some coping skills instead of, taking a full course of therapy. So some of it was a practical level too of trying to meet a need.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, as much as you feel comfortable, feel free, if you wouldn't mind sharing on this, like
Yeah.
even your own, like how you grew up as a kid and some of the things that you struggled with and how that sort of even informed the work that you're doing, but also like even the thoughts of like a
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I think it drives a lot.
mm,
I was a super, super anxious kid. I got diagnosed with OCD at 7, and I had very involved and caring parents who tried really hard to get me into therapy and get me the help I needed. But in the 90s, we didn't really have access yet to CBT, to
mm,
exposure and response prevention, to all these things to treat. So it was really a slog. And I probably was the kind of kid that would have been labeled 2E today. Like,
mm,
I was very gifted in reading and languages and extremely behind in math.
mm,
So I was like, getting 800s on the SAT in 6th grade, but could not tie my shoes or tell time. So,
mm,
like, just a very uneven thing. And I hated school and I skipped all the time. And I think really started to internalize this message that I was not good at school. This was not a good place for me. I could not handle it. Like, I was
mm,
fundamentally lazy or just not cut out for school. Um, and really, my saving grace through that whole time was theater. That was a place where I felt like I was good at something, like I was valued, like the traits and skills that I had made sense. And I was connected to a social community. And it was almost like there was this little island in
mm,
like the sea of crap that I was wading through, where if I could just get there and have a little break and feel competent for a while, I could get back in and swim upstream some more. So
mm.
I think having that community was really life changing and like potentially life saving for me, like to know that there was a place where I could be good. And that is something that has been an undercurrent in all my work with kids, is like, how can I create that island in my office? And like, I've really seen these D&D groups become an island for a lot of these kids,
Mm,
the way that theater was for me. So even though I
mm,
was not in this like a geek world growing up, I really see the parallel of having that like theater nerd community and
mm,
having this D&D nerd community where kids who have special interests, special skills, maybe are thinking and learning in different ways than their peers, are valued and are competent and it's a place where those differences are really celebrated.
that's so well said. I think just to highlight something like a little nuance, I think for those of you that are watching, often the best course ideas are come from our own personal experience. But then Katie shared a nuance, which I think is so true, which is it comes from a place of like revenue is a byproduct of serving others. I think that's sort of the best way that I can put it. And I think when you come from that sort of perspective, it changes. It becomes less about selling a course, but it becomes more about a bigger transformation in the lives of someone else. Uh, you alluded to D&D, so tell us. I mean, I guess there's like a two-parter here. When you first joined the mastermind, D&D, I don't think was like really
No,
like the
not
path
on the
at all.
radar, really. No,
So
it was not.
what was the initial idea? And I know that we were navigating and trying to go through it. So,
Yeah. I had started playing around with therapeutic D&D early in the pandemic. I had
mm,
moved to North Carolina, right? Did not know anybody, had no friends, and was like, I'm going to say yes to every invitation that we get because I cannot afford not to socially. Like, I got to meet people. And so the theater people my husband was working with invited us to a D&D game. I was initially very reluctant because I associated it with math, which we've established
mm,
I'm very bad at. So I was like, this is not going to be the game for me. And then I got in there and realized it's a theater kid game. There's tons of
mm,
improv. The numbers are really just there to create boundaries and rules. And saw even then that like there was a lot of therapeutic potential because it's just one giant projective technique. Like, you are creating a character for yourself and inventing these scenarios with your friends, and it's all a part of you.
mm,
So we started playing. It was great. COVID hit. I was terrified that I was going to lose my whole practice at that time and was really nervous about it, and had all of my these middle school kids I'd been seeing were isolated at home. A lot of them did not have a solid friend group that they could be on group chats with and FaceTiming with to get them through that lockdown period. And they were really depressed in a way that I had not seen before. I'm an
Mm.
anxiety therapist, and suddenly my entire caseload is dealing with severe depression. And I had started joking around, like, what if I just prescribed D&D? Like, what if I just told them to all play D&D? Like, that's what's getting us through. Our game had moved
Mm.
online. And I figured I could. And so, when I started the mastermind, it was this very tiny part of my practice where we were running, one or two of these groups. And it was intended to be a short term thing that I assumed would fizzle out after COVID. Like, this is a COVID era idea. It's just a silly little thing we're doing on the side, mostly with local kids from my practice or from other therapists' practice online.
Mm.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I started thinking more critically that I looked a little more seriously at what was going on in there.
What what do you it's usually, I know it's usually probably a series of events, but what do you think shifted for you to start looking at this more of like from a side thing to like, wow,
Like a
this
main,
could be something that could help a lot of
yeah.
people and generate like substantial revenue?
Well, I think it happened within the mastermind. Some of it was just a function of time. The groups were running and running and running, and I sort of kept waiting for the bottom to fall out and waiting for the interest to go away. And I was like actively not marketing them. And it sustained and continued to grow at a slow rate. And
Mm.
in the mastermind, I had another course idea that I had kind of brought to this place of like beta testing and trying to get people to do live versions of so that I could test out the idea. And it was very logical and reasonable and based in CBT and based
Mm.
on the stuff I do in my practice. And yet I could not get people into my beta group.
Mm.
It felt like I was begging and pulling teeth and like begrudgingly bringing people in who I knew were not a great fit because it
Mm.
was who I could get. And it just felt like work to get them there.
Mm.
And I had a couple of attempted betas that I shut down and refunded because it just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
Like it was just, I couldn't get enough people who were good fits. And at the same time, I was realizing like, man, I am like lovingly crafting these intense marketing emails to pitch this possible course to my counseling email list.
Mm.
Meanwhile, I've put my D&D groups in their own side thing at this point, and I felt like I could just like sneeze into that mailing list and I would get 5
Mm.
responses back immediately, or like bang out a quick email like, hey, we're opening another group, let me know if you want in, and it would just be like, it would be filled immediately without effort. And you had
Mm.
kind of started talking about not being afraid to like hyper niche your course, like really go several layers more specific than you might have imagined, and also kind of like going where the fish are. Like if you're going fishing, you want to go where the fish are. And I was like,
Mm.
this audience is so much more responsive and
Mm.
engaged, and it doesn't feel like work when I'm in there with these people. What if I reniched this course to really go hard at D&D and to really figure out what that group wants next, as opposed to making an assumption about what I think people want?
Mm. That's so good. A lot of good questions in there. And again, if you are watching us live, be sure to leave a comment, even where you're joining us from, even your course idea, or if you have any questions for us, be sure to share that as well. So, Katie, you said a couple of things. One, I feel like so many of us, when we get to a beta, we have an idea for a course, we get to a beta, and we maybe don't get like any interest, like,
Yeah.
people that actually want to pay for this. The default is usually, I don't, okay, this was a bad idea. Like maybe
Yeah.
this was a bad idea, right? What made you keep going?
Yeah. I imagined it as being like bumpers on a lane at the bowling alley, like
Mm.
you're trying to throw your ball down the lane.
Yeah.
It doesn't work and you hit the gutter, but I was like, it's pushing me back in the direction that I need to go. Like, this is
Mm.
good feedback for
Yeah.
me. And I would rather have it now when I haven't put any money or a lot
Yeah.
of time into it
Yeah.
than have it in a year when I've lovingly created a course that looks great that nobody is interested in. Right.
Yeah.
So part of it was that, of imagining it as being just a step in the process. I think part of it too was the mastermind really was helping me connect to a more overarching mission emotionally. Like,
Mm.
there are a lot of other things you can do if you want to make money quickly. right? Like this is not, it is profitable, but it's not immediately
Yeah.
profitable. But because it was so tied to something that excited me and that felt important to me,
Mm.
it was less demoralizing, I think, than it could have been when it didn't work out
Yeah.
initially, because I knew it was work that was personally fulfilling.
Yeah. 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 There was you tapped into something I think internal. One of the things that we do in our mastermind is, and I think this is the magic of having clinicians, because we try to, like, it's not just about the tactics. Like we have live teaching where we're teaching you how to build your course, but we're, my whole thing is like we're trying to change you as a person. And I was wondering if you could, because I think there were a couple of times you were both on the fuzzy seat. So we have these like fuzzy seats where we support each other, but then we have a mindset hour, and there were a couple of times there. Uh, what are some things that, just even one or two things that you remember being hearing and or even experiencing, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to do this, like, it shifted for you?
Ooh. I mean, tons. Honestly, like one thing that I had not anticipated being so important that really was important both in like our big fuzzy seats and in smaller groups was like the first step to having a successful course
Mm.
was clearing out space in my life to think about it, because I think I had been in like survival mode and grind mode for so long where my only focus was like I need to make enough money to like pay my bills and put aside stuff for savings and like, get ready for this baby. And that I was just in this cycle of like more clients, more clients, more clients, which
Mm.
did not give me enough time, not just to build the course, but even to like really reflect on what is needed, because I was just in this zone. And I got a lot of feedback from therapists who are further along than me of like, you need to raise your rates.
Mm.
You need to raise your rates. Just the
Mm.
idea of things costing more than I had been able to wrap my mind around was huge. And I just had this vision that as soon as I changed the numbers for the groups or my clients or whatever, that I would just get this like slew of irate emails like, how dare you do this, which have never come. Like nobody has ever been mad, really. But consolidating my caseload into 2 days a week and raising my rates so that I could afford to do that and giving myself ample time to not just build the course, but to think about it, is what made it possible to come up with this really bonkers idea, this hyper
Mm.
specific, very off the wall idea that I have now. And I think if I had just been trying to grind by working on this at night after seeing 20 clients a week, I don't know if I would have gotten to this point. And also, I think the journey to get there would not have been as fun. But like shifting the mindset around time was huge.
Yeah. There's a phrase that I've been reflecting on. I heard fairly recently. Time is our most valuable asset. It's the thing we can't get back, right?
Yeah,
Uh, and I think you're absolutely spot on with this idea of courses. Like, there's something to physically clearing out space in
yeah,
your time to create courses um, that is just, it mentally frees up
yeah,
time to be able to
yeah.
do something, right?
Yeah. And I think also developing a different relationship with the folks who are in these groups. They're not
Mm.
therapy clients. We don't have that same, therapist patient
Yeah.
dynamic. And realizing that in this more kind of coaching and course field, I can ask directly what they would like from me. And that not only is that not weird, but many of them were excited and happy to share ideas of like, I think this would be great for my kid. I'd love it if you offered this. So instead of feeling like it was this market research was this sneaky and covert thing that I had to
Mm-hmm.
like glean passively from like, I don't know, Reddit or the internet, but directly asking folks, hey, you've been in these groups for a while. Which of these three things sounds really cool to you?
Mm-hmm.
They told me what they wanted the course to be,
Yeah.
and it was not a mystery.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
there's something, it's a weird process, the journey of course creation, because you go into it feeling like, all of us I think probably have like an idea of like, okay, this is something that could do well because like I'm seeing therapy clients, like I'm seeing this over, but there is an element of humility that's required, because you realize you think it's like 100% there, but it's more like 50-50, right? Like 50% of it's
Yeah,
gonna have to get created,
yeah.
like co-created, essentially. You know?
That's exactly right. I thought I had a really good idea. It seemed very like straightforward to me, but I think it was not specific enough.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We do this exercise in our mastermind. We call it like the 5 layer dip. Like, so it's basically taking a so ideally, you want to create a course for a person in a unique situation. And what you want to do is you want to go down at least 5 to 7 layers deep on each of those, like the specific type of person and the specific type of situation. So, like with Katie's, and correct me, Katie, I think this is essentially a leadership course based on Dungeons and Dragons for tweens and teens who particularly struggle kind of with anxiety or who are left out of like leadership positions because they're seen as weird or awkward or
Yeah.
any of those kind of things.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. A lot of the kids who are interested in this course or in our groups at large are kids whose interests just don't line up with like the extracurriculars
Yeah.
offered at school. You know,
Yeah.
they're
Mm,
not going to be in varsity sports. They're not really interested in speech and debate necessarily. Like I had a
mm,
parent tell me once, like I forced my kid to do Model UN because I figured it was the closest thing to something they'd be into, and they have to do something. But like,
mm.
how do you help kids whose interests and skills aren't necessarily rewarded by like our mainstream school system have places where they can develop expertise and feel like they are the leader in something and learn those soft skills with their peers of feeling confident that they have something to offer.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Hi, Janetta. Janetta says hi from Charlotte.
Yes.
And
Hello from Davidson.
um, let me
Janetta.
see if I can pull this here. Hearing that Katie's initial idea evolved into a totally different idea is very interesting. Sounds like being open and flexible is super important in the journey.
Yeah. I'm remembering now, Mel, that something you told early on as well was like to think about a course idea that you could be excited and talk about for 5 years or more. That like
Mm,
really encouraging all of us to think about the long term as opposed to just what's immediately ahead of us in the moment, which was not a mindset I tended to be in. And even at the time that I was starting to work on my first coping skills course, I was like, could I really be excited about this for 5 years? And I was like, no, but it'll be fine.
mm,
I'll figure that out in five
mm,
years. Not now, but that should have been my warning sign that I wasn't there yet. So like, yes, part of it was being open and flexible, and part of it was also paying attention to like what's fun.
mm.
What is fun for me? Because if it's not fun for you, then like how is it going to be fun for
Yeah,
anybody else?
yeah, right. And I think I'm so glad you shared that because I think, especially in the online course creation space, I think a lot of these messages that one, like courses are easy to put together and they're just like instant sort of revenue generators. Um, and then you just like sort of move on and go to your next course if you want kind of thing, you know? And I'm so glad you're speaking to this because I think one of the main reasons, and this is what I'd love to hear, we talk a lot about in our mastermind of like thinking about your course, but thinking about the recurring and the um, scalable offers that come beyond the course, right? And
Yeah.
I wonder if you could just take us a little bit inside of how that might apply to your course and how you were sort of thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that fast money thing really is a fallacy. Like I actually
Mm,
very quickly cranked out a course before joining the mastermind, like literally like from the Airbnb where I was like waiting for my son to be born in the nearby hospital. I had like recorded it in 2 days and then uploaded it to Teachable and was like, it's something, right? So like, has that sold really well? Not really. It's like a
mm,
$99 course. It was 50 for a long time, but it has not been this like life altering thing, right? This like practice changing thing. Whereas this one is taking a lot more time and thought.
mm,
But I can see these really exciting kind of spin-off almost opportunities with this where, you know, something that has kind of come around as a byproduct of developing the course. Like when I did launch my beta for this course, after speaking to parents about what would be most useful to them or most exciting to them, instead of doing it as like an hour a week for 6 weeks online, we did it as a summer camp format where
mm,
kids in my town came to a space in my town for a half day for a week. to do the course curriculum in person. And that was so fun. It was like really super fun. And they all created these D&D campaigns together, these games that they hadn't, imagined, and then played them for each other, ran their games for each other at the end of the week. And it was super fun. And then we did it 2 more times as an online camp and had kids from across the country join us online. And I assumed that would be a one-time thing, that it was sort of our like backdoor beta to test the course. But then I had somebody email me like, are you doing camp again? Like, camp was really fun. Like, we want to come back to camp. So now I feel like we might just do summer camps, and we've got this curriculum ready to go that we don't have to develop again. And I can also see a world now where maybe in a few years, there's more of either like a package or a membership type format where kids who are wanting this more well-rounded social emotional support might be able to opt into our weekly groups that are, live and in real time with a facilitator, and then maybe a couple of online courses or the course and some coaching with me, so that they're getting these different modalities and they all kind of work together to serve the same population in different ways.
Yeah, I love the ideas. And I think one of the things that we do is live teaching in our mastermind. And one of those live lessons is something called the value ladder. And this is basically, we have each of our members not just like think about their course, but think about like what are lower cost offerings beneath the course, what are higher priced offerings. And then the cool thing with the live experience is we go into breakout rooms and you're getting feedback from colleagues about like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? This is why this might not work, but try to tweak it this way. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, like the breakout rooms and how those have been really helpful versus, I think it's sort of a unique facet of our mastermind. So
That the small group breakout stuff has been one of the most valuable parts for me, for sure, hands down, because you're creating relationships with people who really understand what you're working on and they really know you and your stuff. And so I had some very like tough love and spicy people in my breakout rooms occasionally who would really like give it to me straight in a way that not a lot of other people in my life would, because they're not my friends. Like, we know each other on the internet. And so they could just straight up tell me like, you've priced this too low, or like, that's not a great plan. And a lot of them are in different stages of their lives with parenting than I am. So they're not just clinicians who are like running their practices, but they're also like parents with kids in my target demo sometimes who can tell me like, you need to think about after school schedules, or you need to think about when kids get their schedules for their next semester, stuff like that. But I think I have learned so much about how to effectively market in a way that I had not thought of before, by speaking with therapists who are further ahead in their process than me, like what they're doing to market their courses. How to price it. I would never have considered pricing it as high as I might be doing now. And also really just feeling like it was more normalized to do this, because it is still such a relatively niche thing to pursue, that like early on, it was scary for me to even tell people I was interested in doing a course, let alone a leadership course that uses Dungeons and Dragons for middle schoolers, because like, I don't know. There's like a lot of support online for building a practice, but less for this. So it would sometimes feel like a very foreign idea to my like local therapist community. And there wasn't just a lot of like, we couldn't offer each other mutual support in the same way. So remembering that I'm not alone and it's not a completely harebrained idea, and there are people who are like succeeding and thriving doing this, was very, just, what's the word I'm looking for? It was like, it really helped keep me feeling enthusiastic and motivated.
yeah, I imagine on some level it's probably like what these tweens and teens feel when they're signing up for the D&D groups. Like
Yeah,
these are my people,
I think there
like,
probably is like a parallel
yeah.
there. Something I've thought about a lot is like, there was a study that came out recently that like within the next few years, 60% of children who are currently in elementary school will be working jobs in the future that don't exist yet. That like, our schools are having to prepare children for jobs that, because of this tech revolution we're in, we don't even know what they are yet. We don't know what they're going to be, but it's not going to be these traditional career paths anymore. And looking back, being like, God, yeah, like I wouldn't have been great if somebody had told me in school, like, it's fine that you can't do math. Like, you're gonna run online D&D groups someday, and it's gonna be really fun for you. But like, that didn't exist. Like, that wasn't a job that I could envision. And like, we've got to help these kids hold on until they find whatever that thing's gonna be. But I think for therapists too, to see like, you know what, there is this emerging world where therapists can help in other ways. And if it feels like full-time private practice isn't for you, that is okay. And there it is sort of like a little island for the rest of us who
Mm.
are
Yeah.
thinking about these more emerging, out of left field ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Like I was gonna share this. With our group here. Katie had shared. I was gonna share.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get the tech to work here. This is a lot of tech I'm not used to here. So, all right, here we go. So this is. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger as well. All right. Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen this, but like the first time I saw this, I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting." So this is basically a God, why am I like forgetting the name of the curve, right? This is a curve of like, right, yeah. This is a curve of typically when a new product or service enters sort of mainstream culture, right? And I feel like, especially with courses and therapists, I feel like we're probably in this like left innovators and early adopters. Like, there's those of us who are thinking about this stuff, but like the vast majority of people are like, I personally think most, if not all, therapists eventually will have an online course as part of their toolkit. One, because bell curve, thank you, Dan, and will have it as part of their toolkit. And the reason is because one, there aren't enough clinicians. Two, we know there is an entire generation as a result of COVID with mental health kind of concerns, and how do we reach people in new and innovative ways, right? And it's stuff that I think so much about, and but it's so scary to be on this like innovator, early adopter sort of path, uh, or at that stage because we're figuring it out, right? Um,
Yeah. And it was you were reminding me as we were looking at it too, that I think another benefit of speaking with people personally is so often on social media when people launch stuff, it's like, I launched it and it went great and it changed my life and it's really
mm,
successful. And you're like, wow, they really had it all figured out. But what they don't usually post is like, I tried to beta this and nobody signed up,
yeah,
or nobody opened my email, or my profit margins are really slim the next couple months and I'm nervous about it. And you don't get to see the bumps that happen on the way to success. So I think people quietly wonder, like, am I the only one
yeah,
who struggled with this? Am I the only one who's not sure if they
yeah,
can invest as much right now? You know,
yeah,
like, so seeing that other people are going through that and giving yourself more of a realistic idea of what it means to build something was so affirming, you know?
yeah. I think that's spot on. Like, there's so much silent suffering. What I noticed just in generally among entrepreneurship, but in entrepreneurs, but also like especially among therapists, like
Mhm.
um, yeah. I have two final questions for you, Katie, and we'll get you out of here. I was wondering if you could just even take us inside of the mastermind. What's it been like for you? What are some of the things that you've particularly enjoyed? Hey, Michael, great to see you. Michael's coming in from Mississippi. Um,
Yay. Love Southerners in here. That's exciting for me. Love that. So like stuff that's been really like personally good for me and meaningful for me in the mastermind. I think having it be so super focused on therapists who are wanting to create an online
mm,
product was so helpful, because there's a wealth of like more generic marketing advice out there, but there are so many things that we as therapists have to take into consideration that I think other small businesses don't. Where like, we really want to be ethical. We really want to protect people emotionally. We don't want to be overly salesy or manipulative with the marketing messages that we're sending. And yet we also need to learn the skills for like, how are we reaching people?
mhm,
So having something that I think is so specifically attuned to this incredibly niche subset of entrepreneurs was really helpful. Getting solid feedback, not just from you, but from other people in the field who really have expertise and could just like you bring them some very vague or weird or off the wall question, immediately they can give you a very pinpointed and specific answer of like, do X thing this week. Like
Mhm.
very actionable advice, as opposed to general theory was so
Mhm.
helpful. Like, oh, I need to go and solicit Google reviews for my business. That is a step that I can take this week that I would not have thought of otherwise, right? Like, it's not theoretical, it's extremely practical and sequential and step by step so that you really know what you're doing and why. Um, was super great. And I think the mindset piece was so important of
Mhm.
getting out of that mode of just looking at what's in front of me now and thinking about like what you talk about a lot of when I look back at this career in 30 years, like how do I want to feel about it? Like this is your life's work that you're building now, and what a privilege to get to think about. Is it going to be something that you feel happy with when you look back on your life? Are you going to feel happy with the amount of time you spent with your family? Are you going to feel happy with, you know, the time that you
Mhm.
had and not just the money? And it's not just about arbitrarily chasing some number, which I think is also like a pitfall of a lot of other marketing stuff of like you're just chasing higher and higher numbers. But like what does a like rich and full life really look like for you? And
Yeah.
so I think shifting my perspective to I want to live this kind of a life as opposed to I want to make a bajillion dollars
Mhm.
and be able to post that number somewhere and have people go, wow, good job. You know, it was like a really big mindset change
Yeah.
of you want to live that rich life now and not in 30 years,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely. And defining what success looks like. And I think
Yeah.
this is one of the things, right? Like, so a couple of things. All of the members in our mastermind are 5+ years in business. So you have like people that have been through the fire, have built successful practices and businesses. And the other piece of it is um, you're just just lost my train of thought. But I think like when you're getting that advice, it's like legit pieces of advice, right? It's not so.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It's all very like, I think, grounded in reality and not just like dream about it,
yeah,
like it's very,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think when we were even designing it, like obviously now I think the mastermind is 3 years old, so we've continued to refine it, tweak it, and there's just what we really thought about is how do we support you holistically, right? So we have the live teaching that gets your course up and running. We have mindset hours that help you sort of work on the fears and imposter syndrome and all that stuff that comes up for all of us,
Yeah.
right? We have course growth and scaling hours where we're actually building out your webinar, right, to help market your course. So it's not just like you're building your course; you
Yeah.
actually have a marketing channel. You also have access to our video editing and graphic design team, which is like super practical because you don't have to hire a video editor or a graphic designer to help out with stuff. So yeah, we really try to do it kind of holistically. Katie, the last question I've had for you, and um, what's something encouraging that you would share with a colleague who's watching and thinking about launching an online course, but is kind of torn about it?
I have had more days where I have woken up excited to get started at work since working on this online course than I ever had in my life
Mm.
before this. And if you are somebody who has a topic or a population that you are so excited about that you cannot stop talking about it, like if there is something for you that, like I have talked your ear off about D&D, you feel like you could talk the ear off of somebody else about, it isn't a short road and it's not the best way to get rich quick, but I do think it's an incredible way to get to a rich feeling life
Yeah.
pretty quickly. Like, am I ready to retire and live off of my course? No, but has it replaced enough of my counseling income that I like can take my son to his dance class tonight and duck out early and have the energy to do that? Yes. And it is such a cool way to use your brain creatively that you may not get the chance to do in your one-to-one work. Yeah, if you are willing and able to look at a slightly longer timeline to get to
Mm.
that financial point that you want, I think that the road to get there is so much fun.
Yeah, and it is such a different way of like than again how many of us have been trained as clinicians, but it's journey's not easy, but I think as with most things it's worthwhile. It's not, right? And Yet I think there is something so incredibly fulfilling. And I think the thing you're alluding to it, the thing that's most surprised me as like, I'm a course creator as well. And it's the way that it's changed you, right? And it makes you more courageous in ways that you could have never imagined. Like doing a live stream like this, oh my gosh, if you had told me I was going to do this, I would have been like, no, thank you. Like, how do I,
Yeah,
where's the exit,
no group
So,
like community mental health Katie, who was skipping all of the like scaling and like empire
yeah,
building type episodes, would be like very surprised, I think,
yeah.
to see where we are at now. But yeah, it's such a fulfilling and exciting thing to feel really proud about the work that you're doing, and to feel less cynical and less jaded and less like I'm punching the time card in and out every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing we wanted to mention is, even as you're watching this, first of all, like, thank you for taking, for 52 minutes out of your day to come join us. We hope this has been incredibly helpful for you. Kelly, great to see you. Dan says, I love this. You two are so much fun to listen to. Dan is so incredibly kind. And yeah, it's an amazing journey. Not an easy journey, but one that is incredibly fulfilling. And Katie, where can we learn more about the course? And then we didn't even mention this. Like, I was wondering if you're comfortable, again, like sharing some of your most recent launch numbers and um,
Wow. Yeah, I could actually I might actually need to pull them up, but I could at least give a ballpark estimate off the top of my head. But yeah, if they're interested in the groups or the course, you can head over to youngdragonslayers.com. That is our company name. So you can enroll in the online weekly groups right now, which are just D&D groups that are facilitated by people who have a background in working with children, either in education or mental health, and we have an emphasis on social skill building through that. And that is ultimately where the online version of the course will live. Now that I've done it live a few times, the online version will be launching, I would think, within the next few months, and will be available to download here, as well as, if you're in the North Carolina area, information about our summer camp in July. And then as far as numbers, I would say when I started the mastermind, I was running two of these weekly game groups and then kind of moved to four, and was making, I don't know, like 9,000 probably per launch, 10,000 per launch, something like that for these 3-month D&D packages. And since I shifted and started pouring a lot of attention and love into this community of people that seem to be loving me back, as opposed to like just desperately casting out stuff into this counseling mailing list, our most recent launch was 16 weekly D&D groups. We are serving 70 kids. I have 5 facilitators, and our most recent launch made in the ballpark of 36,000 for that quarter, which is like a huge way to come. And most of that growth happened in the last 13 or 14 months.
Yeah, it's amazing. Katie, I'm so incredibly excited for you. I know I speak from all of our colleagues that are listening and will listen to this in the future, just how incredibly proud we are of you. You're doing so much like amazing work in the world and to help these kiddos. And yeah, it's simply amazing work. And yeah, I'm grateful for you. And yeah, thank you again for doing this. I will leave some information about our mastermind. We also have a ton of cool stuff to help you get started um, with your online course as well. I'll put all of that in the links in the comments section. We've got a free course creator starter kit. It's a 7-day email course to help validate your idea. We are wrapping up our launch for our online course mastermind this week, and then there's an opportunity to schedule a one-on-one as well with me. And thank you, everyone. And Katie, thank you again. Appreciate you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Yeah, this has been so fun.
All right. Bye, everyone. See you later.